How long have you been in Richmond?
Since 2002.
My family moved to Richmond when I was 2.
I moved to Richmond in the summer of 1987.
I have been in Richmond 26 years, I think.
From Annandale, Virginia, with my band at the time, which was the Wiggins.
We moved here in 1990, so it's almost 27, right?
I've been in Richmond since the 70s.
Immediately got involved in the music scene. That was the plan, is why we came here.
We moved as a band.
But I didn't really get into things until mid-80s.
Our first show actually was not until late January or February 1988.
And they say, man, you should come down to VCU, it's kind of fun, there's tons of bands, blah, 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 blah.
I knew city kids that started going to see shows when they were like 13.
And that was at Rockets, opening for House of Freaks.
I guess everyone always thinks they missed, you know, the golden age of stuff. I saw a lot of cool stuff. I'm glad I got involved when I did.
I've been at it on and off ever since for almost 30 years now. So.
There had been different times when the music scene had been located in different parts of Richmond, the bottom, but after the flood of '86, everything moved up to campus.
Gray Street, though, is very, very different now than it was. A lot of prostitution, drugs, you know, more of a dangerous sort of neighborhood around here.
We're also the capital of the Confederacy, you know what I mean?
So it was a little bit sketchier in the 80s and 90s, a lot sketchier.
Probably in like the early 90s, everybody was in bands. There was shows, you know, like 6-7 days a week, there was free shows.
A 6-block radius, you had everything you wanted.
Now you look on Gray Street, they used to have a bunch of character, and now it's all these boxy brick buildings.
VCU had not taken over downtown to the extent that they have now, and there were more sort of independent businesses. There was Grace Place, a vegetarian restaurant, and Exile Boutique, and Bohannon's, and the original Village.
There was the Biograph Theater, the Village Cafe,
Newgate Prison, Jade Elephant, Twisters, Rockets.
The Metro and Rockets was there at the corner of Laurel and Broad, and then right behind it is a little teeny place, and it was called a bunch of different things over the years. Whistler, Sunny Bucks. By the end of the 90s, early 2000s, it was this place called a Hole in the Wall. Well, there was a biker club where you didn't walk in front of that. That was Hububba. You know, I weighed probably 90 pounds and I was picked up by my neck by a 200, 300 pound biker. Where the Broadbury is now, that was a rock club during the 80s called the Cellar Door.
You know, like Noir was around the corner, and you could see like Mike Dirks used to bartend like down the street a few blocks, you know, like, and that was super, super cool.
Guar was located right around the corner on Broad.
There was a strip club, a XXX theater, which is now the Art Theater.
Street band, electronic band, they're all on sometimes the same night, you know. Sometimes you'd have to figure out which one you're gonna go see because there'd be 2 really good bands that you wanted on the same night. There was so much going on. And then there was Schaefer Court, and they had free shows on the weekends, on Friday night, that the VCU just paid for and anyone could go see, which was awesome.
All these crazy bands would come to. Red Hot Chili Peppers played in Schaefer Court for free. It really exploded in the early 90s. It was awesome.
And then there were venues that I missed out on because I got here late for Benny's and Hard Times and things like that.
But that was basically the strip from the Village to where Chipotle is now, basically.
It was, you know, it was a little bit more of even more of a kind of intimate, small town scene where everybody knew everybody kind of, and like Twisters, and then it was briefly the Bagel Czar. I never actually went to it when it was Nancy Reagan, but that venue, whatever it's been called, I feel like it's always kind of had the same sort of vibe. I mean, they've done renovations and it's had different owners and different names and stuff, but it's always kind of felt the same to me.
Twisters, that had been a club in the early 70s called the Back Door, and I think that because Springsteen was loosely associated with Richmond through Robin Thomas, he had been the singer for Steel Mill for a second, for Bruce Springsteen's band. And so he had glommed this other band called Mercy Flight that was from Richmond, and he had absorbed Robin Thompson as the singer. So for a while, Bruce Springsteen's band was sort of based out of Richmond, from my understanding. And they played the Carey Street Gym, they played the VCU parking deck. That was all in like the early 70s. The Ramones, the Ramones played the VCU Gym. They played the Flood Zone. They played, I don't think they played New Horizons, but they played Richmond fairly regularly.
Well, there were a lot of different things going on, as there are today.
I don't feel like there was a huge scene, if I'm honest.
Richmond's always had a real laid-back punk scene. You know, people didn't really wear a lot of, I mean, some people wore a lot of spikes in their hair.
And it was more like dudes that wore all black and wore industrial jackets and like steel-toe boots and kind of like rocked at shows. When
stuff. But for the most part, it was a real relaxed, non-showy thing. And
it wasn't cool to be a punk band from the South. It wasn't cool to be like an alternative band from the South. Like,
it was, it was a little bit more of even more of a kind of intimate, small town scene where everybody knew everybody, kind of, and like.
But it's not shocking that the metal and punk scene was, I think it's still pretty small, but it was really small back then, so.
There were bands that put out stuff, like White Cross put out stuff. There was Four Walls Falling, which was like the only Virginia straight edge band.
The 80s with the Good Guys and 1010 and, House of Freaks or the Dads or whatever.
Everybody was doing stuff. Like everybody was playing music, everybody was building sculptures, everybody was painting, everybody was doing something artistic. And that part of it I loved. I loved that everybody was doing it, and it was cheap, and it gave us a huge base of kids.
I saw the tail end of the dairy scene too. The dairy was, it's still sort of there. There's 3 walls left of it. They gutted it and made condos out of it. The roof leaked terribly, and there were no walls. You had to build your own thing, but other bands started filtering in. So this is about 1984. Death Piggy moved in for a practice space. The Alternatives were there.
The Alternatives were from here, and they were on SST Records, which is the Black Flag record label.
There was the beginnings of the math, what's called math rock, with Alternatives and Slang Louse and King Sour and Breadwinner, of course, Honor Roll.
There's some math bands, but it wasn't that Breadwinner was here, but it wasn't really that crazy.
So that would have been, the late 80s, like 89.
I guess through some symbiosis or whatever, they all just sort of came together. And so if it hadn't brought all these people together under one roof, it might not have happened in the way that it happened. Death Piggy had been around a while. Death Piggy moved in. Hunter Jackson, who was like the founder of Guar, rented a studio there, trying to film a movie. Death Piggy was Dave's theatrical punk band. Scumdogs of the Universe was Hunter's movie project. Both of those went away, and Guar kind of came out of that. It was just sort of supposed to be a one-time only sort of movie project, 1 or 2, performance art pieces, but then, 30 years later, 32 years later, it's still something. So once the ball got kind of rolling, it sort of got out of anyone's control, and it was more about everyone joining and just lending their particular abilities to a project. I'd say Guar, if you have an academic look at it, it could be titled anti-art. It's very reactionary, it's very against art. It is art, but it's against art, so it's anti-art. I think, especially the guys that started Guar all told me that Guar was definitely a very much reaction to the formal art training that they couldn't stand. They wanted to do skulls and robots and, murder and you know, fun stuff. And early on, there was a bunch of shows where an art critic would come out and critique the show while it was happening, you know, and then get killed, of course, to everyone's delight. We had an art gallery on stage where all the art would get destroyed. Guar would come through the art and, you know, like kill the art teacher. So that was kind of something that I loved and drew me to it as well. We had a compound that was like a block long. And so we built sets out there and we filmed shots. So we filmed like a lot of Alice in Wonderland there. We filmed a lot of our long form movies that got Grammy nominations. We filmed in the yard. It was a big complex. We were really lucky. It was so cheap. And I lived there for 11 years. A lot of us lived there. But we started having parties and calling them barbecues. And there were free parties and we had bands play there.
We were a band in Northern Virginia for a couple years. There were other members in said band. But we kind of say, as a whole, and because we don't really care what the other ex-members think, Avail started in Richmond, basically. When we first started here, like, we were just some dumb transplant band from Northern Virginia, right? Because there was a big thing, like, you know, Northern Virginia kids moving down here and pretending they're from Richmond, and then Richmonders like, you're not from Richmond, like, we're from Richmond, you're from somewhere else, you know? But I sat outside of Johnson Hall and Rhodes Hall and passed out flyers and just talked to people. And then we played our first free show at Twisters, which is now Strange Matter, and it sold out because it was free. So there was like 300 kids there, and we're like, what the fuck is this, you know? And that's just how it happened, the progression.
I got back from the first Guar tour, and they had just moved to Richmond, and they were like causing a big stir, you know, being straight edge and starting fights and stuff.
We were definitely like a band that didn't sing about politics because we all have different politics. We didn't sing about any type of religions because we all have that or lack thereof. We didn't have anything that we had to really like talk about outside of like just our, like literally our personal experiences and the things that happened around us. That wasn't cool in punk rock. It wasn't cool in hardcore. It wasn't cool to be like, we don't have a fucking politics. We're singing about Over the James, you know? It's a beautiful day, you know? So like, and we did push the fact that we were from Virginia. We did push the fact that we were from the South. It was a big thing to us, like it.
But, you know, they kind of stormed into town and made a big dent pretty instantly. I guess they had some sort of history in Northern Virginia that I'm only, like I said, slightly aware of. You know, they were the ones that really took on this pro-Richmond kind of good cheerleaders for the local scene.
And I want to say that we were one of the first bands to do it from Richmond, and then it became a big thing. Like, yeah, we're Richmond bands, you know? We would take Richmond bands out. We would take the Inquisition out. We would take out Strike Anywhere on tour. And then we would become friends with Hot Water Music and take them out on tour. And I want to say that us touring and us playing constantly and our young, stupid work ethic made other bands move here and made bands start here.
Live, they couldn't be beat. They just brought so much, you know, it was bananas always and fun. And I remember that was the first time I ever heard someone being like, I'm pro-Richmond. I think Richmond's great. And I said, that's kind of wild. Local pride, huh? That's weird, you know. Then I just remember it being sort of a thing that got bigger and bigger and bigger. People being really proud of being from Richmond and being them talking about it and saying there's a scene there. And sort of preaching about how cool Richmond was. And I really did spread a lot from them. Well, I mean, they were just a great band. They started at a party, sort of as a joke metal band. But it was sort of a joke of all these guys that were in non-metal bands doing metal. Then when they decided to actually keep doing it, they just got better and better and better. So I was a fan from day one. I always thought they should have remained a classic Richmond instrumental band. But, you know, they got Randy, and of course, bands without singers, you know, nothing can come of that. Like, you lose everyone real quickly. So their success has definitely been due to Randy's a great front man and stuff like that. It worked out perfectly for them, and he's an awesome singer. So, you know, we always like to give Randy a hard time, but for the first year, they didn't have a singer. They were just an instrumental band. you know, their album he joined and the album came out and it's great. So the first official Lamb of God show, I did the flyer. It was the 2000 very last barbecue, which was summer of 2000. You know, I was drawing the flyer and I said, you guys have been saying you're going to change your name. What do I bill this as? Are you still Bird the Priest or are you Lamb of God? And they were like, no, this is going to be our first show as Lamb of God. War took them out on a tour. And then, of course, like usual, they eclipsed us and went on to be really far more popular. And they deserve it because they're, you know, they're incredible. So. And I saw an early Waste show at Hole in the Wall, and it was probably 2002. And some of my friends knew them and loved them. So I was a little fuddy-duddy at first because the whole thrash kind of revival, I had seen it the first time around, so I was like, eh. But our guitar player, Corey Smoot, had a recording studio, and he recorded their second album, the one that everyone, it's probably their sort of Rain and Blood or whatever, their best known album, I guess, maybe. Hazardous Mutation, Corey Smoot recorded, and that sort of got us in with them. We started out at Alley Cats. We played 2003 New Year's Eve at Alley Cats, and then 2004 and 2005 New Year's Eve, we played at the Canal Club, and we played with Municipal. So that kind of got us and got me to know them, and then I was like, oh, well, they're incredible. They're, you know, it's a whole new thing, and it's way better. They're great at it. So I kind of got over myself, and then in 2006 we took them on tour, and then we took them on tour in 2011. I mean, I'd like to take them on tour every single time, but you can't do stuff like that. You know, you have to like change it up so people don't get sick of it. But I think they're the best of that type of thing, which is, you know, kind of the music I like the best. It's just funk and metal. But and then of course through that we took out Aaron Reagan because of, you know, it's Phil and Tony's band, and then met all the other guys. Even though I knew Ryan Parrish from Darkest Hour, the drummer for Iron Reagan was in another band, Darkest Hour, that wasn't from Richmond, but they had like 3 Richmond guys in it.
It's funny, you see old videos or whatever, and somebody posted a video from like the early 90s, I think, driving around in Richmond then, and it was funny because I was like, wow, I didn't remember exactly what a shithole this place was.
Which it's always struggled with, I think. Richmond's always struggled with its sense of self because it's always been sort of ashamed of who it is, which what makes it great is how neurotic and weird it is. That's what's good about it, is like how it struggles with things, because it's like, it's the capital of the Confederacy, you know? I mean, that's a horrible, horrible thing to put on anybody. But, you know, that's why so much good, weird stuff comes out of here, you know? Places that are happy or don't have a troubled past, you know, they don't make anything that's, you know, look at Charlottesville. What do they come up with, in my opinion? I don't like happy people, you know. They don't make good art. That's a fact.
Like, that's what it's all about. Like when you're finding yourself and you're just like want to rebel against everything and anarchy and all this cool shit that you're into, because it's punk rock, in my opinion, is for kids. It's for young people. It's from like your teenage years to like your mid-20s, and that's like, it's all encompassing in that time of your life.
You know, punk rock has meant lots of different things over the years. Punk rock is not a musical genre. Punk rock is an approach to life.
I realized that, you know, it is. Like every generation that says, you know, punk is dead now, like punk isn't as cool as it was. It's like, no, dude, like you're 20. You'll never know what it's like to be a 15-year-old again.
That's a lot of things about a lot of music, I think, that people have forgotten. Live music is one thing and recorded music is another, and I would much rather see something live. And it might not even be a music that I like, but live you're going to enjoy it just so much more.
I would like to see the audience expand some. I feel like, I felt for a really long time that there's a lot of kids going to VCU and they don't go to shows. You know, they don't know about what's happening here, and I think that's kind of sad.
I think that's a real big part of Richmond history, is this scene surrounding the university that's not necessarily part of the university.
The difference between VCU then and VCU now is VCU was kind of the weirdo art school, and that was the culture here.
Back when we moved here, nobody gave a fuck about the basketball team. I still don't give a fuck about the basketball team. Nobody cared about like the science department there. It was an art school. You went there for art. If you couldn't get into RISD or you couldn't get into Parsons, you came down at VCU for a couple years and then you transferred out of it.
You know, you come here and you get a place in Oregon Hill and you smoke a lot of weed and you paint and, you know, do sculpture and are in a band. And that was like the life of the VCU student, kind of.
Downtown studio space, how expensive it is now and how people can't afford to take risks or just experiment or play around. Well, that's all it was there to do then. So when you have nothing but time and very little money, you know, you can be experimental.
Now at the business school and mass communications and I don't know and like they have a basketball team that people have heard of, and it's just more of a real university kind of. It's not as freaky. You know, it's not as weird, and I think that's affected the culture here a little bit.
I'm happy with where we are. I'm concerned with this sort of glut on the arts. Whatever that official RVA like logo branding of Richmond has me sort of concerned.
I think that there are old heads that are stoked on it, and there's certain like younger generations that are still jazzed on it. But I think like the average person doesn't even, they're like, what? Who's from here? So like all that cool stuff was in there, and now it's fucking gone because that blight.
It's funny now, people try and like use the fact that somebody's from Richmond as some kind of street cred. That's a thing now, I think. That Richmond has so much street cred that you have to say like, we're a Richmond band. It's like, you're not. You've got some guys from Richmond in your band. But I'm always constantly like, that's so weird to me, but
you know, I like a lot of the changes that have happened in Richmond, but that aspect of it, the corporatization kind of the VCU area is kind of a drag.
Yeah, things are good right now. I just don't want Richmond to lose, you know, its sense of self. Like Richmond's population is like, I mean, it's just like tripling in the last like 10 years.
I feel like, as I say all the time, I feel like the scene has never been better than it is now. I don't remember there being house shows to the extent that there are today.
But as far as what's happening, as far as there's more shows and house venues and official venues than ever, you know, so I think of the state of like bands coming out of here and bands coming here is really great.
You know, Strange Matter is just here, you know. Gallery 5 is just, that's Richmond. You know, if you're going to spend 4 years in Richmond, you know, check out the music and the art. Otherwise, you know, you might as well be in Montana or where, you know, wherever you came from.